This game has lived in my head for my entire life. If you ever ask me to name a game I loved as a kid, you ever see one of those like social media posts going around, I don't go to Mario or Sonic, I go to Little Big Adventure. I originally wrote this script back in 2020. I'm sure it won't take you long to figure out why I was turning to a game that I played when I was a kid during a year of unprecedented trauma. I didn't actually finish playing the game back in 2020, and I didn't finish writing this script or making this video. But 5 years on, the desire to talk about this game hasn't really left me. So I found myself reinstalling the game, playing it through again, and finishing this script. But why? Little Big Adventure is a PC adventure game developed by French developer Adeline Software and released for MS-DOS in 1994. In the opening cutscene, I think we establish a lot of what's going on here. There's a lot of cute, charming energy, and we're given a pretty cool little story. The planet of Twinsen is so called because it has twin suns. The cute little people that live on this world are elephants and rabbits and cute little doll people that don't quite look like humans, but you know, they're kind of human. They're friendly shaped. It's established that these people live under the tyranny of an evil clown dictator called Dr. Funfrock. The traditional faith of the planet is outlawed. There is like a state-enforced atheism. There is a story of a messianic chosen one who will one day rise up from obscurity and bring balance to the force is essentially what's going on here. So Funfrock basically pulls an Emperor Palpatine. Anybody who talks about this prophecy or anybody who speaks out about the party is completely disappeared. He actually has actual Gestapo who go around from house to house making house arrests. There's this rampant state control, this total tyranny. And oh yeah, now I completely understand why this game has been calling to me lately. The main character of the game is called Twinsen, and we're shown that he is dreaming about the end of the world. He's having these visions of this goddess calling to him, and essentially the state find out, and then he's dragged away by the thought police. The first level is set in an asylum or a prison, essentially somewhere that Twinsen is put after he's taken away by the Gestapo, and a guard just turns up and starts beating you in your cell. If you don't do anything about it, he'll beat you to death, and you just have to keep redoing this section until you figure out what's going on, until you get it right. There's no direction here, there's no hand holding at all, and I think that's actually quite nice. The game is kind of telling you, like, you're on your own here, you gotta figure this out. You end up having to disguise yourself as a doctor and then escaping from this facility and then running around the town while everybody's trying to get you. And so you're really paranoid about who you can speak to. You're like thieving to try and find some money or to try and find some food or some health. And because you're thrown in at the deep end like this, I really felt like I was a man on the run in this opening chapter. I didn't know who I could trust. I thought that was really good for an opening salvo from this game. Twinsen's girlfriend also ends up being arrested by the Stasi, for aiding a political enemy of the state. And so essentially that sets up your motivation, right? You want to get your girlfriend back. And it's all very adventure gamey stuff. It's finding the right item and then using it on the right thing. Not very much of it is very clear. You're not told where these items are. You have to find them. And then it's also not really clear what you're supposed to do with some of them when you have them. So there's like lots of backtracking. There's lots of that like use everything on everything kind of vibe. Twinsen gets swept up in a globe-spanning story of resistance and rebellion, travelling between all these different islands in this archipelago. Everywhere you go, you see people suffering under this totalitarian rule, people living in like misery and poverty. But eventually you start to hear about rebel cells on some of these islands that are rising up and fighting back against this tyranny. And you get swept up in it too. You're fighting Funfrock's army. There's one sequence where you're like storming the beaches of one of Funfrock's islands. You're in an amphibious landing craft. It's going up to the beach, the ramp drops down, and you and the troops are running out and fighting. This is like Saving Private Ryan but it's like these strange little cartoon rabbits, and having that in your head at the same time, these two things of this being really cute and really violent and disturbing. The whole thing gave me real Earthsea vibes. If you've ever read Ursula Le Guin's Earthsea books, I think it has that energy where it's like this really whimsical vibe, but it has this real dark underbelly to it. And in fact, I don't know, like I could be wrong here, but the Quetch from Little Big Adventure, which are like the human-like characters, in my head, this is exactly how the Gethen look in Left Hand of Darkness. But yeah, there's just something that's very Ursula Le Guin-ish here. I just think it's great. I just love that. All of these beautiful animations, unfortunately, means that the controls can sometimes feel a bit sluggish. There's lots of extra wind up and cool down frames on all of these animations, which is lovely for the presentation. It gives it lots of weight and lots of stretch and squish, but it does make everything a little bit harder than it needs to be. The warm-up frames before you start moving, for instance, can be really frustrating, and then combat is where this can get just really bad. The rhythm of getting shot can feel pretty broken at times. The recovery time before you can move just to get out of the way is basically the exact same amount of time that lapses in between different shots. So essentially you're always getting stun locked in loops that you're just powerless to get out of. Technically you can do the same thing to enemies, so the door does swing both ways, but trying to line this fucking ball up it's a fucking nightmare. With that said, I think this kind of matches the tone of the story. You know, it looks cutesy and it looks like it's for kids, but this game will legitimately kick your ass over and over again. The Temple of Boo is a perfect example of what I've been talking about. It's got all these, like, if you know it, pitfalls. There's these infinite damage traps, the timing of certain puzzles. It is insanely hard, but it's one of those you do a little bit better each time kind of things, you know? It's weird because LBA doesn't really feel like that kind of game, but what you're essentially doing is experimenting all the time. You're trying new methods, you're just trying to get a little bit further each time. It's like the Dark Souls of DOS games. That was a gag left in from the 2020 version of this script, and I'm pretty sure that was a stale joke even then. Now, what I didn't know about this when I was a kid is that this is a Frédérick Raynal game. Frédérick Raynal is the Alone in the Dark guy. It turns out that he, along with a handful of other Alone in the Dark alumni, quit Infogrames and started their own studio. LBA was their first ever game. When you look at LBA with that context, I think this is actually a fairly obvious evolution from Alone in the Dark. The 3D playable character on top of 2D pre-rendered backgrounds, the tank controls, the fact that it's an adventure game with combat added on over the top, pretty janky combat at that, all of a sudden you go, oh yeah, this actually makes a lot of sense as an Alone in the Dark spiritual successor. I mentioned before, but the incongruence between these cute cartoony graphics and this like really quite dour, mature tone, I think there's something really special about that. Alone in the Dark did the same thing, but it kind of did it by accident. It's a survival horror game that suffers from the limitations of the technology and doesn't really feel that scary because of the limited colour palette and the frankly funny character models. And LBA, I think, has learned from that, and what it's doing is intentional. It's intentionally giving us a very scary, frightening story, but delivering it with this cute, appealing visual style. I really enjoyed the back third of this game. The final act is essentially Twinsen discovers that Funfrock's ultimate goal is to drill down into the well of the goddess to find her and to take her power for herself. And all of a sudden I was getting these like strange cosmic horror vibes from all these dudes in the Arctic trying to drill down into this mystical rock to, you know, find the secrets that are down there. You climb down the well, there's a big sword fight with Funfrock, and it's brilliant. I mean, the end sequence, spoilers for a 30-something-year-old game, but you get to meet God. She tells you that she's been gestating a new spiritual being, and by defeating Funfrock, you've allowed this new cosmic entity to be born. You're responsible for taking the whole planet and all of its people into this next level of spiritual enlightenment. I didn't see that coming. It was absolutely fucking wild, but that just feels so incredibly French. Returning home, all of the characters you've met throughout the game are there welcoming you back. There's this really charming music. There's a street party. Everyone's put tables of food out. They're all like clapping and welcoming you back. There's bunting everywhere. And then you go and there's like a concert. There's like a gig that they're playing to welcome you back to home. Honestly, it was so fucking charming. I nearly cried. Legitimately, I nearly cried. It was just so saccharine and so sweet. I just loved it. And I didn't just love it in this playthrough. As I mentioned before, this game has stayed with me for so many years. I had this game when I was a little kid. My mum got this for me for Christmas. It was published under the EA Classics label, which was like a budget PC label of slightly older games. But playing it now, you know, in the modern era, in DOSBox, it's just so lovely, so charming. The story is so bizarrely grimdark against that, like this charming cartoony presentation and this like bizarrely grimdark story. It just feels like a very Prime Stoked game. Stoked is very much about celebrating lesser known games, lesser known art that you might have missed. But it's also to highlight just how much good stuff is out there in the kind of belly of the bell curve. A lot of it is buried under the more famous, perhaps popular press attracting mainstream stuff. But if you can get past that, you can often find some super great hidden gems. LBA is one of those games. It sold pretty well. It even got a sequel, but it didn't really make it into the zeitgeist the way that Doom or Monkey Island did. It definitely has a legacy in the modern era. It definitely has a cult following. There are lots of people who would say, yeah, this is one of my favourite games. I remember this. And I know you'll be in the comments section. But also, we know that this isn't a game that people bring up when they talk about classic games from the 90s. For me, this was a genuinely epic game. A great story about corruption, about totalitarianism, about the thought police. And it's told in a time when the PC was genuinely leagues ahead of home consoles. The visuals, the music, the scope and the storytelling, these are just on another level. There is so much to love about this game, and there's so much that I do love about this game. If it wasn't so fucking hard, I would probably play this through annually. I'd make this one of my every year plays like I do with like Grim Fandango. That aside, LBA is easily an important milestone for adventure games and an important reminder of just how bloody good French games were and how important they were to the general landscape of computer games. Before we close up, I just want to give a big shout out to the channel contributors and the supporters. Super kind that a few of you choose to give me a little tip at the end of each month. If you want to see your name at the end of these videos, then there are links in the description that describe all the perks you can get for supporting me on the various tiers. And a special shout out to Smoking Eagle and The Crawl, who are both on the shout out tier. So thanks very much to you two, that's super amazing. Right, that is it. I'll see you all in the next video. If you like old PC games, check out my previous uploads, and I'll see you in the next video. Alright, ta-da!